Yomi Bava Kamma, 46b. And we're at the two dots, a little more than halfway down the page. Okay. So we spoke about in the Mishnah a scenario where we have an ox that gores a cow, and we find a fetus next to the cow. We're not sure if the fetus was there. The cow miscarried prior to it being gored, or it was because of the goring that the animal miscarried. Similarly, we had the inverse scenario where a cow gored an ox, and the cow has a fetus beside it. And in that case, the question is, the payment of a tam is migufay. Does migufay include the animal, let's say the newborn or the dead fetus, or not? So we don't know when it gores. So the Mishnah says you pay half the payment from the animal and a quarter of the payment from the fetus. And the concept here is what we explained yesterday: is momen hamotel b'safek cholken. This is the opinion of Sumchas. We have a doubt. We don't know. Who the which if the cow gored when it was pregnant or after it had a baby. So therefore, we say half the payment. You can't pay half the payment. You pay half of half the payment, meaning you split the doubt. Okay, so you pay half the payment from the cow, and another half of half the payment from the newborn. What's the problem with that?
Are you paying half and also the newborn?
So I'll rephrase what Steve is saying. There's a major problem here. How much do you have to pay for the damage? Half payments. What's half plus a quarter? 3/4. So what's going on here? Why are you paying 3/4 for the damage for a regular tam? Tam only pays half. So why does the Mishnah say a quarter and 3/4? So the Mishnah, we'll get to two explanations here. The first one, Abaya, is not quite intuitive, and then we get to Rova, which is very simple resolution. Okay. So the Gemara says Chatzi Nezek Revia Nezek. I'm sorry, Chatzi Nezek Revia Nezek. Paganisk. Why are you paying a half plus a quarter? Paganisk Hudavar Shlumi. You only owe half the damage. Kulanisk Nechi Riva. All the damage is minus a quarter, meaning 3/4 Mayavite. Why do you have to pay 3/4 of the damages? So Amar Abaya says, well, just to preempt what the Gemara is going to say a line later, which is that Abaya's teretz is dependent on this key fact. The aggressor, the cow, was owned by one person, and its fetus, now either newborn or deceased fetus, is owned by somebody else. So somebody bought the rights to the newborn. Okay. So what happens? So what happens now? Effectively, each of them splits the damage. So meaning the half payment is split. Half of it goes to the owner of the cow, and the other half would theoretically go to the owner of the fetus, the now newborn. But the now newborn, we don't know if he's responsible or not. So he pays half of his half. So let's explain. Half the damage is half of payments, right? Because the damage is split equally between the fetus owner and the animal owner. So the animal owner pays half of the full half payment, which is a quarter. Where a quarter of the payment is actually half of that half payment. So the half, again, we're taking the 50% payments. That's the entire payment that's given. Half of that 50% payment, in English 25%, goes to the owner of the cow. The other half should go to the owner of the newborn. If we knew that the newborn, that the cow was pregnant at the time that it gored. Because we don't know that, you can't make him pay the full quarter. You make him pay half of the quarter. 12.5%, which is an eighth. Okay, the Ipar of Vlad Dechad Ninu. Now I just explained to you, I went ahead a little bit and told you that it was owned by two different people. Okay, if Gemara explains this slowly, if the cow and the fetus were owned by one person, if they're owned by the same person, so then the victim says, "Oh, I don't care if it's the fetus, the newborn, or the original cow. I just want you to pay me half the payment." And he's entitled to collect it however he wants. He can collect a full half payment. The scenario must be the par dechad v'vlad dechad. The cow belongs to one person, and the newborn belongs to a different person. Okay, so now we get to an interesting caveat. Let's say he goes first to collect from the para, the cow, the goring cow. So hachanami, the amar lebal para didach azikdach. He can tell the owner of the cow, your cow damaged my ox. Havli rayad islach shutfi. If you so you owe me a full half payment. Now you want to exempt yourself by saying, look, well, half of me, meaning half of the cow, was owned by the fetus owner. Well, okay, prove it. There's no question here the cow damaged the ox. What we don't know is if it was pregnant at the time. So you certainly damaged. You want to exempt yourself from half the payment? Go talk it over with the owner of the fetus and bring some proof that I have to go collect from him. Otherwise, I expect full half payment from you. So that clearly can't be the scenario of Abaye either. So what is the scenario? He went ahead and he collected from the owner of the fetus. The Amarle, now the owner of the cow could tell the victim, Galisa adaitech the shutfa isli. You've revealed that you believe I have a partner in the damage. In other words, the owner of the victim is basically admitting that half the damages ought to be paid by the owner of the fetus. And because you made that admission, so therefore I'm going to pay half of my half portion, and which is 25% of the damage, and the owner of the fetus is going to pay half of that, 12.5%, because we don't know whether he was a participant or not, and whenever we have a doubt, we split the money. Because again, going back to what we said yesterday, this is the opinion of Sumchas. Sumchas resolves any dispute with 50-50. Okay, it's not quite every dispute, but we'll get to that. I think we'll get to it above Mitzia. We'll talk about exactly when Sumchas makes a statement. The key concept called a Dror de Mamayna. Okay, we'll get to it. Okay, Ekidamri, some say, even if he goes to collect to the owner of the cow first, before we were saying that if he goes to the owner of the cow first, then he is entitled to collect the full 50% from the owner of the cow, because he says, ultimately speaking, your cow damaged me. You want to claim you have a partner? Well, go prove it. It could be that he can make that argument even if he isn't collected from first. I am aware that you have a partner. In other words, you have a partner that the owner of the cow could say, I am certain that I have a partner, meaning the owner of the fetus, and therefore he can send him to collect 50% of the 50% from the owner of the fetus. Obviously, he doesn't get that much. He actually only gets half of that, which is total 37.5%, 12.5% for the owner of the fetus. This is the resolution of Abaya. Amar Rava. Rava does not like this resolution. Does the Mishnah say a quarter and an eighth of the damages? No, it doesn't. It says chatzi nezik or revi nezikatani. It says a half and a quarter, presumably of the actual damage. Amar Rava, so Rava says la'olam b'para. B'para of Vlad Dechad. We're talking about where the cow and the fetus are owned by one person. And this is what the Mishnah means. Isa Lapara, if the cow is around, Mishtalam Chatzi Nezek Mipara. Okay, so obviously initially we collect the full half payment from the owner of the cow. However, what happens if the cow escaped or it was hidden? Tom only pays Megufay. If you don't have the animal around, then there's no payment. Certainly, according to Rabbi Kiva, that says Yuchlat Hashar, meaning you actually become a partner of the ox. So now you want to collect from the fetus. So Mishtalim Ravi and Ezek Mivlad, you can collect up to a quarter of the damages from the newborn. Okay. Time and Yadina and Ihava Vlad Bahada, Kinaka Iloihava. So we don't know whether or not the animal was pregnant at the time that it gored. However, let's say we were certain. If okay, so let's say we know the pregnant animal gored, then the animal gave birth. You can no longer find the mother. The mother vanished. So now the owner of the aggressor still owns 50%, still owes 50% of the damages. Can I collect the fetus on behalf of that 50%? Again, we're talking about a certain case here. The animal was certainly pregnant at the time, and now there's a newborn. Can I collect from the newborn instead of collecting from the cow? So the Gemara implies that according to Rava, you can collect a full half payment. Why is this? Rava, according to his own opinion, the Amar Rava, a cow that the damage you can collect from her child. My time gufahi. It's considered part of her body. This is in this we spoke about in the past the concept called kinyan, acquisition. What kinyan do you make when your animal gives birth to a child? None. There's no need for it. Why? Because it's yours. What comes out of yours, your animal is yours. The Gemara will explain. Tarnagoylos shehezika. A chicken that did damage. It's also, however, with regard to a chicken, you do not collect from its egg. Now, even though you own it for the same reason that I explained a moment ago, this is not considered a gufa, its body. My time, what's the difference? Pirsha ba'almahu. This is sort of a regular process where it's not really any different than a waste product of the animal, and therefore it's not considered the guf of the animal itself. It's not considered the animal. It's considered something the animal provides on a regular basis. I presume the same would be true. Let's say the milk of a cow. The child of a cow is considered the body of is considered like the mother itself with regard to the fact that it was part of the mother when the mother gored, and therefore even after it's born, it's considered part of the same body that gords, and therefore you can collect from it. However, the chicken egg, that's not the animal. That's sort of something the animal makes, and therefore you can't collect from it. For Amar Rava says, "Ein shaman lepara b'fnei atzma or levlad b'fnei atzma. El shaman levlad agav para." Okay, this is an interesting technical aspect, which is how exactly would you evaluate the damages or potentially the aggressor. Now, remember the Mishnah had two scenarios. One was where an ox gored a cow. The other one was the opposite, where a cow gores an ox. So going here to the again, the ox gores the cow. There is a dead fetus beside it. We don't know if the ox gored and made the cow miscarry, or the animal miscarried first, and then it was gored. Okay, so how do we evaluate this? We talk about shaman levlala gafpar. We evaluate them as one unit, meaning what? So, for example, let's say the damages to the ox was minimal. So we say the evaluation is as follows. Originally, you had a pregnant cow, and now you have a cow that isn't pregnant. What's the difference in value between a pregnant cow and a non-pregnant cow? That's how you would evaluate the question. You would not say what's the value between the cow and its newborn against the cow that is not pregnant. And the reason for this is sort of the most fair. It's a conservative estimate, but it's precisely what was damaged. Okay, when it says Shemi came, because if you don't do this, you damage the aggressor because you make him pay more than he actually damaged. The same thing is true with somebody who cuts off his friend's slave. Meaning, you don't say, what's the price that a person would pay to have his slave's arm cut off? What you say is, if you went to the slave marketplace and you had two slaves, one with a hand, one without a hand, what would be the difference in price? And obviously the reason for this is no sane person would cut off anyone's arm, and therefore it's not a fair way to evaluate it. Okay, the same thing is true if somebody damages his friend's field. Yeah, which is basically, again, there's two ways to evaluate this. Like if I ate a couple of your tomatoes, we can ask, what's the cost of tomatoes in the grocery store? But if an animal goes into a tomato field and eats a bunch of tomatoes, the proper way to evaluate it is what was the field worth before the animal consumed, and what's it worth afterwards? That's a lot less of a payment than the retail markets. Okay. So Ravacha says to Ravashi, one second, all these evaluations are very conservative. Why? So we don't damage the aggressor. Well, I don't understand. The idinahu, if this is the law, so then let him pay more. In other words, he's saying, you're telling me the reason is because the mazik is getting damaged. But that's not a reason. What is the reason for the law? Because if the law was mazik should be damaged, then okay, we'll be happy to damage the mazik. There's a lot of other things we do to make life inconvenient for aggressors. Okay, so Rav responds to Omerlei par mavart aziktoch par abarto shamonalach. In other words, because this is appropriate to pay. What he actually did was he damaged a pregnant cow. And therefore, he says, evaluate a pregnant cow. Don't evaluate a cow with its fetus. That's much more than the difference in value between a pregnant cow and a non-pregnant cow. Okay, Shita, it's obvious. If the cow is owned by one person and the newborn is owned by somebody else. Pitma l'bal para, nifchamai. Okay, in other words, the animal is the cow is a victim of aggression, and because the animal is pregnant, so we have two different things. One is that the animal is fatter, not just because of the fetus, because the animal is typically fatter during pregnancy, and this is very specifically mipnei shumna, because it's more fatty. Second question is nifcha. The animal looks larger, and that's probably because it's pregnant. And evidently, an animal that looks larger is worth more. Okay, so pitnba, the value of the fat, that exclusively is the benefit. The one to collect that payment is going to be labal para, the owner of the cow. However, nifcha, the fact that it looks much larger, who gets that benefit? In other words, that portion of the evaluation is provided to which party? Rav Papa says it goes to the owner of the cow. Rav Acha says it's split equally between the owner of the fetus and the owner of the cow, because both of them are equally responsible for the fact that the animal looks significantly larger. And the halacha is that we indeed split it. Okay, Mishnah 47a. New title. Hakadar shehichner kaderoisav l'chotzer. You have a kadar, a guy is a potter. He brought all his pots into a courtyard. L'chotzer balbayis shaloi b'rshus, without permission. The shavra and they were broken. The shavra b'hen shabal potter. The owner's animal broke these barrels, so the owner is exempt because there was no business for the barrels to be there. And if the animal, while the animal was breaking the barrels, the animal got damaged. The owner of the pots is liable. If, however, he brought the barrels in with permission, the owner of the courtyard is liable for damaging the barrels. A similar story, he had fruits, he brought it into the courtyard of the owner, without permission. Sure enough, the animal consumed some of the fruit. Potter, the owner of the animal is exempt because there's no reason for the victim's fruits to be there. Let's say the animal trips over the fruit, the owner of the fruit is liable to pay. But let's say he went in with permission. The owner of the courtyard is liable to pay for the fruit. Similar story. He had an ox and he brought it in to somebody else's property without permission. And it gored the ox of the owner. 1 second. I'm sorry. Okay, so again, somebody without permission puts his ox in his ox occupies somebody else's property. And the owner's ox gored him. Or the owner's dog, took him for a ride. Potter. The owner is exempt from the damages because the victim had no right to be there. If his animal, however, gores the animal of the owner, then he is liable. Okay, the animal falls into a pit belonging to the owner. The hivish meimav, and it made all the it ruined the water of the pit. I guess it was a cistern that was being used to water the field, and now the water is no longer usable. It's contaminated. Chayev. So then the one who fell into the pit, the owner of that animal who was there without permission, is liable. If the victim's father or son was on the property and got killed by the aggressor animal who did not have permission to be there, and the owner of the aggressor animal has to pay kaifer, even though the animal is a tam. We'll have to discuss this. However, if he did have permission to bring his ox there, then to the contrary, the owner of the property is liable. Rabbi says, in all scenarios, the owner of the house is not liable unless he accepted to watch the animal on his property. Meaning, just because I give you permission that your ox can be in my property does not mean that I'm watching it, I'm taking care of it. And therefore, the owner of the ox would still continue to be responsible for the damages of his ox on my property, even when he has permission, unless I specifically say that I'll watch it for him. Okay. Gmara begins. Taimo the shaloi b'rshus. Ha b'rshus loy mechayev alakteres miniski behemtei balchotzer. 1 second. Okay, so there's a slight contradiction in the Mishnah. Let's go. The first line of the Mishnah says the kadar, the guy who has the pots, he puts his pot in somebody else's property without permission, and it damages the other person. It damages the other person's pot. The broken pot damages the ox that destroyed it. It's the responsibility of the owner of the pot to reimburse the guy who has the ox. Why? Because he was there without permission. if he was there with permission, presumably, he would not have to pay. But not only does not have to pay, actually the owner of the ox has to pay him. Is it right? There's two separate questions here. When you have permission, do you need to pay the owner of the ox for the fact that the owner of the ox, the ox got damaged while breaking your vessel? And does the owner of the ox have to pay you, the owner of the pots?
Yeah.
You got both. You heard both questions.
Oh, yeah. Sounds like a head-on collision to me.
Precisely. Exactly. It's a head-on collision. So who has to pay who? And so the first part of the Mishnah seems to imply that the owner of the pot is exempt from paying the owner of the ox. One second. Okay. Thank you for that. Okay. The one second. Hold on. Okay. Okay. And the owner of the pots, by getting permission to put his pots in the property, is not accepting responsibility to be liable for the owner's cows. And that's why he's exempt from damages. However, the second half of the Mishnah is he does have permission. Not only is the pot owner exempt from damage to the property owner, the property owner's oxen, the property owner is actually liable to pay the pot owner. Asal Rabbanon. This is clearly the opinion of the rabbis. The Amri b'stamanami kibule kibul alahan tirusa. The rabbis say that if you give permission for the guy's pots to be there, what you're saying is not only do you have permission to be there, but I'm going to watch your pots, and therefore the cow, he's responsible for the actions of his oxen. The Sua, moreover, so the first line of the Mishnah seems to be Rebbe. Rebbe says if you have permission, okay, you have permission. So you're not, but that doesn't mean you're accepting other responsibilities. So, for example, if you have permission for your pots to be there, then your pots are allowed to be there, but you're not responsible for what happens to the owner's ox if it gets damaged. And similarly, the owner would not have responsibility to make sure that the pots aren't damaged. In other words, the owner of the pots wouldn't be liable for damage that he caused, but the owner at the same time would not be liable for damage caused to the pots because he never accepted to watch the pots. This is the opinion of Rebbe. So Rebbe starts off the Mishnah, but also Rebbe concludes the Mishnah. Rebbe is the last opinion at the end of the Mishnah, and then in the middle, right in the middle, he put the Rabbanon's opinion, the rabbi's opinion. So Reisha v'Seifa Rebbe Mitzias Rabbanon. The beginning and the end of the Bryce of the Mishnah are Rebbe, and the middle is the Rabbanon. So Amr Zera says, yeah, you're right. Tavra, you have to break the Mishnah. Shanazu. Yeah, Rebbe is the beginning and the end, but not the middle. Rava says, Kula Rabbanon. The Mishnah is entirely the opinion of the rabbis. Ubershus Shmiras Kederas Kibel Olav Balachotzer Afilu Nishbu Baruch. We're talking about a scenario where the owner accepts full responsibility for the pots, regardless of how the damage would accrue to them, even if it broke with the wind, and therefore Therefore, the owner of the pots is exempt from any damage, and the owner of the property is liable for all damage. And it's all the opinion of the rabbis. Okay. He brought his fruit into the property of the owner without permission. So we said if the animal, let's say, trips on the fruits and gets damaged, it's the responsibility of the owner of the fruit. What happens if the animal eats too much, and because it ate too much fruit, it dies? So Amar Rav, so Rav says, it tripped over them. But if it ate too much fruit, Potter, the owner, is exempt. My time, and what's the reason? It had no business eating somebody else's fruit. Now, obviously, it's not liable for eating the fruit because the fruit was there without permission. But if, in terms of the animal overeating and dying, the owner of the fruit is exempt because it should not have eaten his fruits. Rav Sheshes says, Amina, I said, Rav Omer Lahoshmaitza. When Rav said this idea, he was sleeping. Because basically, it's a nice way of saying he's incorrect. Why? The Tanya we learned, a guy puts poison in front of his friend's animal. He's exempt from standard monetary compensation, even though heaven will exact retribution. So the Gemara says specifically Sam Hamava is poison. The animal typically can identify the poisons. I guess there are certain poisons the animal can certainly identify, and he used one of those poisons. So the animal should not have eaten the poison. Avaparis, but fruit, the avida de achla, where the animal normally does consume fruit. Bedine adam nami mechayev. 1 second. Yeah. Okay. So in other words, specifically poison, you're liable. You have a heavenly retribution. But with regard to 1 second, I'm sorry. Specifically with regard to poison, you're exempt from monetary compensation because the animal should not have eaten it, because apparently the animal can recognize the poison. However, regular fruits, where the animal should have been eating it because that's normal, so therefore you don't have the argument of havalosh le'toichel, it should not have eaten the foods. It could have eaten the food because it was normal foods. And therefore, you should be responsible for the animal's overeating. So the Gemara says, Amri huadin afilu peres nami potem dini adam. The truth of the matter is that even if the animal overate fruit, you'd also be exempt. Now, so if that's the case, why does the Brisa pick on poison as opposed to somebody providing the animal with so much food that it overeats and dies? This is the chiddush. I feel some of us nami the loy avid achlo chay b'din shemayim. In other words, even though poison, which the animal typically can identify and stay away from, you still would exact heavenly retribution, because there is a heavenly penalty for feeding an animal poison, even though the animal would probably not eat it. Okay, that's the first answer. The second possibility is nami peri. When the Mishnah talks about poison, we're not talking about a regular poison where the animal can recognize it. We're talking about a type of poison that's a normal fruit that the animal cannot identify. 1 second. Yeah. And still you're exempt financial payments. And it would be no different in terms of the animal overeating, where you'd also be exempt. And yeah, there would be a heavenly retribution exacted on somebody who causes someone else's animal to overeat. Meitzvei. Gemara has a question. A woman that came into somebody else's property to grind wheat, without permission. And the owner of the property's ox ate the grain. So Potter, she's exempt. The owner of the property is exempt. If they cause damage to the owner's animal, chayevas, she's liable. So Gemara says, why don't we say the animal should not have eaten it? Didn't belong to the owner. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? In other words, when we say that the animal was damaged, does it mean that the animal was damaged from overeating? No, maybe it means the animal was damaged because it tripped over it. The Mishnah, we said, it is a scenario where it tripped over it, and not that it overate. So why can't we say the Bryce is the same scenario? Obviously, we would. We say that when we talk about the animal being damaged, it's not that it got damaged because it's not that it got damaged because it overate. It got damaged because it tripped over it. So the Gemara says, yeah, obviously, this is an obvious resolution. Why did you even think of asking the question? Obviously, the resolution would be that it was physically damaged, not that it overate. So Amar Loch, so the one who asked the question would respond, the Mishnah says, it got damaged in the fruits, meaning it tripped over it. It doesn't say the word bahen, just as imhuska. Presumably, imhuska means because it overate, that's why there was damage. Achilu diktani. It specifically says fruits, not that it was damaged by the fruit. So presumably, the Brisa was referring to a scenario where it overate. And the Gemara says not necessarily. The one who resolved the question is not impressed by the extra word of bahen. And he says both the Brisa and the Mishnah are referring to actual damage. Finally, the last proof, Toshma, he brought his ox into the domain of the owner, into the property owner's property without permission. It ate grain, hitras, and it had diarrhea, umeis, and it died. Potter, he's exempt. If he brought the animal in with permission, the owner of the property is liable for the grain that was consumed by his ox. So the Gemara says, one second. The resolution here is obvious. I'm not sure how to even explain the question. It's okay. We'll see the question. The resolution is obvious. The Gemara says, "Why is the owner liable for the ox? The ox should not have eaten the grain." So Rava says, what type of question is this? Brishus ashaloi brishus karamis. Do you mean to ask a question where he went in with permission versus when he went in without permission? Brishus shmiras shara kibbul. When he gave permission that the guy could put his grain there, he accepted that he will prevent his animal from consuming the grain. One second. Hold on. I'm sorry. I had the story incorrectly. I phrased the Gemara correct. Again, restart this last line. Again, what happened was the opposite. The somebody put an ox in a guy's grain courtyard, and the ox overate and died. The owner is exempt. But if the owner accepted responsibility allowed the ox to come in, so then the owner is liable for the animal overeating and dying. So Gemara says the difference here is obvious because over here the owner accepted responsibility that he'll take care of the ox when the ox is in his property. Even if the ox would strangle itself, the owner is responsible. The owner of the property is responsible to prevent the ox from strangling itself. And similarly, he's responsible to prevent the ox from overeating, and that's why he would be liable if the ox overeats, because he accepted responsibility for the ox when it's in his property. Okay, have a great day.